It took him just 4 days to break the backbone of Saddam's war machine.
Imagine you are a soldier. You have spent months digging into the cold desert sand, preparing for the mother of all battles. You are one of a million men, protected by trenches, minefields, and a wall of fire. You are ready for a war of blood and steel. But what happens when the war comes not from the front, but from the sky? From space? What happens when the enemy isn't a person you can see, but a ghost in the machine? For the Iraqi army in 1991, this was not a hypothetical. It was a terrifying new reality. They were a 20th century army, armed with 20th century courage, about to be systematically dismantled by a 21st century phantom, an invisible network that could see their every move, hear their every word, and erase them from a battlefield they no longer understood. This is not the story of how a war was won. It's the story of how the very idea of a battle was made obsolete, the story of the ghost that has haunted modern warfare. To understand the catastrophic collapse that was to come, you have to understand the mind of Saddam Hussein. He wasn't a fool. He was a prisoner of his own success. His entire military philosophy was born from the trauma of the Iran-Iraq War. There, he learned that a determined defense could swallow entire armies. He learned that the world would stomach immense bloodshed. When he looked at the West, and particularly at America, he saw the deep, unhealed scar of Vietnam. He saw a superpower terrified of its own soldiers returning home in body bags. He remembered the 1983 bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon, a single, devastating strike that killed 241 Americans and sent a superpower into retreat. His calculation, from his perspective, was brutally logical. He would lure the American-led coalition into his fortress of sand. He would inflict thousands of casualties, ensuring the grim images of wounded and dying soldiers played out on television screens across the world. America's fragile will, he believed, would shatter. He was preparing to fight the only war he knew. And so, in their trenches, his men sharpened their bayonets and cleaned their rifles. They waited for a battle of blood, courage, and sacrifice. America was also haunted by the ghost of Vietnam, but it had learned a profoundly different lesson. The lesson wasn't to be tougher, it was to be smarter. To never again trade a young person's life for a few yards of contested jungle. For over a decade, a group of military thinkers had been quietly orchestrating a revolution in the art of war. It was called Air-Land Battle Doctrine. The idea was simple, yet world-altering. Don't just defeat the enemy's front line, attack the enemy's entire system all at once. See the enemy not as a wall of soldiers, but as a living organism. And if you can surgically sever its brain, its eyes, and its nervous system, the body will inevitably die. For 42 days and nights before a single ground soldier crossed the border, the coalition put this terrifying theory into practice. Imagine you're an Iraqi soldier in a bunker. For weeks, the sky has screamed. But the bombs don't just fall on the front line. One night, the bridge you retreated across simply vanishes. The central command post you get your orders from goes silent. Your division's general is vaporized in his headquarters, 100 miles away, by a missile he never knew was coming. The radio crackles only with American psychological operations broadcasts. The only thing that falls from the sky are leaflets, with pictures of food on one side and instructions for surrender on the other. You are no longer a soldier in an army. You are an isolated, terrified man in a hole, completely disconnected from the world. Saddam's army was being systematically blinded, deafened, and dismantled, psychologically and electronically, long before the first shot of the ground war was even fired. Coalition's masterstroke wasn't a secret weapon. It was a secret highway. General Norman Schwarzkopf knew Saddam was expecting a massive head-on assault from the sea and across the Saudi border. So, he put on a show. The world's media was invited to watch thousands of Marines practicing amphibious landings. Near the border, a ghost army of a few hundred specialists used giant speakers to broadcast the sound of rumbling tanks and used inflatable decoys to create the heat signature of an entire armored division. Saddam saw exactly what his experience told him he should see. He watched the front door, reinforcing it with his best troops. Meanwhile, the real force, an army of over 300,000 soldiers and thousands of armored vehicles, a city on the move, was pouring into the vast, empty western desert of Iraq, a place previously considered impassable. A navigational nightmare. This colossal flanking maneuver was only possible because of a quiet technological miracle that had just come of age, the Global Positioning System. For the first time in history, a tank commander in the middle of a featureless desert could look at a small green screen and know his exact position on the planet to within a few feet. It turned an impassable wasteland into a superhighway for an invisible army. When the ground war began on February 24th, it wasn't a battle. It was a mathematical unraveling. The Iraqi army was looking south, braced for a sledgehammer blow, instead a phantom army materialized from the west, deep behind their lines, cutting off their lines of retreat before they even knew they were being attacked. This technological chasm was absolute. On the second day of the attack, a British Challenger 1 tank, commanded by a Captain Tim Purbrick, spotted an Iraqi T-55 tank in the distance. The Iraqi tank was nearly 3 miles away, an impossible distance. The British crew fired. The shell took almost 3 full seconds to reach its target. When it hit, it achieved the longest tank-to-tank kill in military history. The Iraqi crew never saw the enemy that killed them. They were simply deleted from a battlefield they could no longer comprehend. At night, coalition tanks with thermal sights turned the darkness into day, seeing the heat from Iraqi engines miles away. For the Iraqi crews, the world was pitch black, and then it was over. The war ended in just 100 hours. The infamous Highway of Death, the road out of Kuwait littered with the burnt-out husks of the retreating Iraqi army, was a grim, apocalyptic spectacle. But the real Highway of Death was the end of a military era. It was the death of the belief that wars are won by mass and might alone. On the nightly news, the world saw 2 different wars. From the ground, there was the chaos of surrendering soldiers. But from the air, there was the clean, almost antiseptic video of a laser-guided bomb flying through a window. War, for the first time, seemed like a video game. In the Kuwaiti desert, the trench gave way to the thermal sight. The human wave gave way to the satellite image. The battle of bodies gave way to the war of information. The Gulf War provided a stunning, almost bloodless blueprint for a new kind of conflict, a concept that would later be known as shock and awe. It showed that an enemy could be so thoroughly disoriented, so completely overwhelmed, that they could be defeated before they even knew the fight had begun. This new reality, the power to see everything, to strike anywhere, and to remain invisible, would raise its own profound and troubling questions for the coming century. What happens when courage no longer matters? What does it mean for the human spirit when a war can be won by an algorithm, when the battlefield is a screen and the enemy is just a pixel? The ghost that appeared in the desert in 1991 has never left. It now hovers over every conflict, a silent reminder that the most decisive battles are often the ones that are never seen at all. If you found this journey to the heart of history compelling, support our mission by subscribing to Heartwood Stories. Press the like button and share in the comments what historical turning point you'd like us to explore next. Thank you for watching.